In this video, you're going to learn how to add these numbers to our bases so that you can see how many units of each team are at a base. We're also going to add a fade out animation to our game over screen so it's not just a super jarring transition. We're also going to fix some bugs and do some overall polish things to end this tutorial series on a high note. With that, let's get started. The first bug that we need to fix today is the one where enemies rotate really weirdly. And so you just saw it right there. They rotate the wrong direction, or the one that isn't closest to the person or the player that they're targeting. You see it again there. So we're going to fix that and make the rotations that AI units will use, like that right there, make them a lot smoother. Okay, and so in order to do that, we're going to come into our actor script. So I'll just select our player right here, and I believe on actor.gd. We find it. So the problem with this is that Godot provides two lerp or linear interpolation functions. One is just lerp, which we're using here, and there's another one specific for angles called lerp angle. And so because we're dealing with radians here, our rotation property and this angle function here are both radians, the number that's getting returned, they're floats. We need to use lerp angle because it handles going between 0 degrees and 360 degrees correctly instead of rotating the enemy all the way around, which is what we were seeing before. So all we need to do for this is just say lerp angle, and it's the same things. We have a from and a to, and then a wait. So same parameters that we already had for lerp, but this will handle internally angles a lot better. So there's actually one other part of this that we need to fix in order to make it work. If you run your game right now, you'll see that your units will still track correctly and they won't rotate weirdly, but they actually won't shoot at their targets. And that's because we have a current bug in our AI code. So I'm going to head over to our AI script. And this wasn't a bug before, but with our new changing it to use lerp angle, we've actually got the way we're doing the math here in our engage state of trying to track the angle towards our target is, I think there's something wrong with it, but it's definitely a little overcomplicated. So we are getting our AI, our actor's current position, and then getting the vector direction to their target, and then getting the angle. But Godot has a built-in handler that basically does all that for you, called angle2. And so we are going to actually replace our logic for this if statement here to be a little bit cleaner. So I'm going to keep our abs method here. So we'll keep the abs function, but get rid of the contents inside of the parentheses. And I'm going to say actor.global position, and then we're going to use the angle2 function, which is a built-in Godot function on vector2 objects. So we'll use angle2, and then here we're providing it a vector. And so it's going to be the same thing we're doing on this line above it. We're going to give it our target.global position. And so again, what we're doing here is it's automatically kind of doing this logic in here for us. And yeah, I'm not sure the exact cause of the bug of doing it the old way, but this is definitely simpler and it works. So we've got this now, and if I run it, I will be able to show you what happens when we get next to an enemy, and you'll see that they rotate correctly now. Okay, so I'm approaching enemies, and as I come up to them, you'll see that they all track me and rotate correctly. There's no weird rotations. They follow me around. They're all shooting. Everything looks way more normal now, which is a huge bonus. So there we go. We've solved our rotation issues. Now it looks a lot more natural, and we've got something that is using the correct handlers that are built into Godot, things that I just didn't catch earlier. And a big shout out to Quirtmore and Tato64, two people who commented having this issue and were able to come up with a solution. So the next thing we're going to add is actually a pretty cool new feature, and that's going to be to put numbers underneath each of our capturable bases to indicate how many of each team are in that base's capture zone. So it provides a visual indicator to help the player see, hey, who's capturing this and how many units are there, what kind of work am I up against. So we'll just add two numbers, one on the left and one slightly on the right of the capturable base, just to correspond with each team. If you have a game or are trying to expand this to work on one with multiple or a variable amount of teams, it's going to be a little bit harder, so you'll have to have some code in there to handle multiple, you can't just hard code in two labels here like we're going to do. So I'll drag our Roboto Model 36 into the font for this label, and then I will duplicate this. So this first one will say player label, and this next one we will do enemy label. Again, we can hard code it since we've just got two teams here. I'll just say 1 for that. Let's just say 3 for the sake of demonstration. And there's no science to this right here. I'm just going to move our labels around till they're in a position that looks kind of right. And what I'll do is test them with 2 numbers each and just make sure that it still looks okay. So if I do 12 here, and then if I do, 32 here, I think that looks pretty good overall. Let me turn on pixel snap here, just so it's, or grid snap here, just so it's a little bit easier to line them up. So I'm going to line them up. We'll just have this line right here. So again, it's an art more than a science. And we'll kind of do this. We'll put the middle right about on this. Yeah, I think that works. And that seems about level enough. And then if I bump these both down to, what we can do also is right align the text here. So if I bump this down to 2, it stays to the right. And then this one will be left align, so it's 1 there. And then it's kind of a consistent feel for our numbers. So, okay, we've got our 2 labels here. Now we're able to we can give them the colors they need and control them from code. Okay, so let's actually add the same colors to these labels that our teams have just to make them a little bit clearer. So luckily we've got these variables set here for both our player and our enemy. So I'm going to copy the HTML code of our, or our hex code, sorry, of our green color. Drag that over to our player label. We'll do font color, paste that in there. There we go. Same with our, we'll come back up here, get our enemy color, copy that. Come into our player or enemy label, do custom colors, and paste that in there. And there we go. We've now got 2 labels that correspond to the colors of our teams. And I'm going to lighten them both up actually a little bit, I think, just to make them a little, still blue, but a little bit more visible since these are kind of darker colors. And so they still correspond, but maybe a little bit easier to see. So perfect. Now we have labels that correspond to both of our teams, which is great. I'm gonna just nitpick and move this over just 1, and I think that'll be a slightly more even. There we go. So now we've got both our labels. We can grab references to them in our capturable base script and then set them or clear them appropriately whenever we have new units that are coming into our base. So if we come into our capturable base script here, first we're gonna need to get a reference to both those. We'll say onReadyVar player label, and this is going to be player label. Copy this, and we'll do enemy label here. It's weird. Sometimes I can type, and sometimes I can't. Oftentimes both in the same video. So we will now find whenever we're changing our player unit count and enemy unit count, and luckily we're keeping these. So we already have all the logic we need about keeping track of how many units are in. We just need to actually change these labels. So again, whenever we're doing body exited or body entered, we can actually just have a helper function here, which will say function change label. I will say change player label, and then we'll say player label dot text, and this is going to be player unit count. Because this is a variable, a field on our class itself, on our script, we don't actually need to pass it in as a parameter. And we could make this just one function that's dynamic that you can pass in something to indicate whether it's the player or the enemy. Just again, for the ease of getting this out there, we'll just we'll hard code it. That's the enemy of all good code, is saying, well, we'll just do this now because it's easier, and then you never go back and change it. But for the sake of this tutorial, we'll do this. So, and now I'm just gonna put these functions into both of these spots where we're capturing this base. So I'm gonna say change player label, change enemy label, copy this here, bring this up here, and change player label. And just like that, all of a sudden, we are changing the text on these labels. One thing I'm also gonna need to do before I forget is stringify these. Since our unit counts are integers, we'll want to make these strings. Easy enough. So whenever we have a unit that enters or exits our capturable base, we should see that our numbers are going up and down correspondingly. Now, another cool thing you could do with this is maybe you can make like a red underline or something, or an underscore. It'd be super easy. Just add another label that's an underscore, make it red, and you could put it underneath currently owned base, or if someone's capturing, you could put it under just as another visual indicator to the player, like, hey, this team is capturing it right now. So we won't do that in this. Again, leave that exercise up to the reader or watcher of the tutorial. But would be pretty simple to do. You could just do another label and underscore, kind of hack your way into it. So lots of potential there. But we'll run this now, make sure we've got everything working. All right. So we boot it up, we hit play. And as soon as we start coming, and this is why you always debug and test, because we see that our numbers are working correct here, but the problem is that we need to default these to be 0. So let's go back into our capturable base and we'll add a ready function here, which we didn't have before. Ready should appear there, and we'll just say player label dot text equals 0. And again, remember they need to be strings because text is a string field on a label. So we'll just set those to be 0 by default. And now when we run our game, we will see that they are 0. And we should see as soon as we start filing in here that we are going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 with me. And there we go. We're keeping track of who's on a base now. And it's nice because it's part of the base. We actually stand over the numbers, which I think is exactly what we want. And you'll see as we leave that all of a sudden we're back down to 0, which is perfect. And then over here, we've got the bad guys. And if I kill one, it goes away. Look at that. And so now you've just got this pretty simple visual indicator of who's on a base at a given time. And it kind of helps add to the feel. I like that it's part of the game world so that if you stand over it, it doesn't actually interfere with your world space. Like, it's easy enough to cover it because it's just kind of something in addition to the base. And again, this would be a great time. We could give like a little red underscore, something to indicate that the player team is taking this base, but it wouldn't be too hard of an exercise to do on your own if you want to do it. All right, so now we've got these numbers on our bases, which is just a nice little addition. And there's one more big polish kind of thing that we're going to do to make our game just feel a little bit better. And that's going to be adding an animation to our game over screen. So whenever the player wins or loses, instead of just having a immediate pop-up of a screen, which looks weird and kind of feels wrong, we're going to have an animation that will fade into it whenever the game is won or lost. So with that, let's head over to our game over scene here. And you'll see right now it's just a canvas item or a canvas layer. And what we're going to do, similar to what we did with our pause screen, is add an overlay that kind of sits as a sibling near the top level of our scene. And what we will do is have that overlay kind of appear first, and we'll have an animation player that transitions it from transparent to opaque and then back to transparent, showing our panel container afterwards. So we'll get started on that. Let me add an animation player first. Animation player, and this will sit, I'll just drag this up to the top, and we'll add another panel container. I believe we used panel container in our pause screen. Yeah, that works. So let's bring this up here, and our panel container here, we will call this overlay again, and we'll make this just be the full rectangle. And we're gonna have a custom style here. You already know we've done this a few times now, but this one we're just gonna make black, straight black. Okay. And so if I hide our panel container, you'll see that we have our overlay, and it's just a black screen. So what we're going to do with our animation player is we'll call this, we'll add a new animation. We'll call this fade. And here we're going to add 2 tracks. One is going to be a property track for our overlay, and we are going to do the modulate property here. And so this is where we're going to make it transparent to opaque and then transparent again. And we are going to add another property track, which will just hide our panel container until we get to the point where we are opaque in our overlay. So it kind of is shown when our overlay is pitch black, so you can't see it. So as our overlay fades out again, it'll fade out into this screen. So I'll do panel container, and we'll just do visible. And so the way this is going to work is, let's make this take, we'll say 5 seconds just to see, or let's do 4 so we can kind of hit it right in the middle. And then so at the beginning, our overlay is going to be, we'll insert a key here, And then we'll have a value of totally transparent. So we'll bring our alpha all the way down. And then we are going to duplicate this key at the end right here. So it's going to be totally transparent. But then in the middle, we're going to have a key that has full alpha. So it's going to be going from transparent to fully visible to transparent again. And here we are going to keep our panel container not visible at the beginning, so you won't be able to see it. And then as soon as we are fully transparent here, maybe just a tiny bit after, so just so that we can be sure, we'll do it right here. That should be fine. And here we will make it visible. So if we run this, you'll see that all of a sudden we have a game over. The only problem though is that our overlay is currently being drawn underneath. So as soon as we show our panel container, that just becomes the main thing. So we actually need to drag our overlay after our panel container in the scene tree. And now if I run it from the beginning, we should see that our fade works properly. There you go. Super, super easy, super simple. You don't need any outside graphics or whatever. Godot's animation player is very powerful, totally able of doing something like this. And the reason this is going to work the way we want it to is because if we come back to our main scene and go into our script here, we'll remember that we're actually instancing our game over screen on top of our main scene. So we're not switching scenes. We are instancing our game over screen and adding it to the same scene tree as our main scene here. So that's why we had to pause it, is because we are not actually switching our scenes. Our main scene is still going on in the background. And this is why as our overlay starts to fade in, it'll fade over top our main scene. So we'll see our game fading in the background. So now that we know why this is going to work, let's go back to our game over scene real quick, our game over screen scene. It's also tough to say. There's a lot of those in this project. So let's just move that over there. So we need to actually play this animation now too. So whenever we could do this on ready. It's probably the best. We could also do set title, but I think on ready is better because we don't want to have to wait for us to call a function. So first, what we'll need to do is get a reference to onReady var animation player. And this is going to be a reference to our animation player. And now what we can do is have a ready function here. So function ready. And we can say animation player dot play, and it'll just know right for us. So whenever this scene enters the game, we'll just play our animation player, which is perfect. The other thing we need to do as well, because our overlay is drawing on top of our container, even when it's transparent, it's still getting mouse events, which we don't want because we want to be able to click our panel containers buttons. So we need to change our mouse filter here for our overlay to be ignore. So it will just ignore it, let those go on to the next thing in the tree. So now, if I actually should just be able to do Command R to run this specific scene, and you'll see our fade, and there it is. And I can click all of these buttons. They're still available. I'll just quit this for now. And yeah, so now we've got a fade animation that works on our game over screen. We're able to get mouse events. Everything looks good to go. In order to test this, just like we've done a few times before, I'm going to get rid of the capturable bases that are not closest to the player spawn so that we can just spawn in the game and capture this one base and then see it work for our game over screen when we win the game. Okay, so I've spawned into the game here and we've only got this one base. So as we file in, we'll see the numbers going up. Oh man, that's just a cool little feature. I'm a fan of that. Oh, my own team is blocking me out here. This is why steering behaviors would be really nice to help with that. But we should see here now as we capture this base, look at that, the fade in, everyone pauses and we go right to a game over screen. Cool. Really good stuff. That fade in is just a much nicer, less jarring transition, and we get this really nice screen here. I can hit restart, and we're back in business. So let me close out of this. I'm going to restore those two bases before I forget. Oh man, everyone. Look at this game that we have built. Look at what we have done from this tutorial. You've got this full top-down shooter game with multiple teams, bases you can capture, win conditions, pathfinding, various levels of AI and intelligent thinking that we've tried to implement for our AI units. This has been a really awesome series. The first one that I made for Godot on YouTube It's been great getting to go along this journey with you all. I hope you have found it super helpful. I've recently released a video that kind of is not tied to this series, but expounds on some of the ideas showing how you can add game juice to your shooter. So in this tutorial, we didn't talk about things like sounds and particles and lights, but those are all really important things that will increase and add to your game feel. So I'll have the link to that video in the top right in the little suggested card area. So if you are looking for ways to improve your own game here, to take this to the next level, that's a great video to watch to really get some ideas for how you can take this tutorial and make it even better. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I hope this series has been incredibly helpful for you. If you find my work helpful, join our Discord server. We'd love to have you there and can answer any questions you may have. A like and subscribe to support the channel are always appreciated, and if you appreciate my work, you can always donate to help keep more great videos coming at Buy Me a Coffee. Links to all those are in the description. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.